If you play games on your phone, then you've probably at least heard of the original Doodle Jump, so I don't even think I need to introduce it. Recently, the Instagram account for the game was hyping up a new project, and it turned out to be none other than Doodle Jump 2, and it released literally about 4 hours before I began to write the script for this video. So as a big fan of the original, what are my first impressions, and how does it stack up as a sequel? Well, the first thing you'll notice is that there's a much more linear approach this time around. Instead of having a bunch of themes open to you from the start, you instead have to unlock them by collecting enough stars in each level. I think this was probably the best approach to help make Doodle Jump 2 feel like more than just a glorified level pack. Also, side note, I really like this level 0 thing. It actually buzzes your phone when you scroll to it, so it's kind of like a little scare. It's a funny, nice thing, yeah. Once you actually start the game, you'll immediately notice just how animated everything is. Like, everything, even the platforms you land on. It can be a little disorienting at first, especially if you're used to the original, but once you get used to it, you'll find that a lot of care was put into overhauling and modernizing the visuals, and it makes the first game feel horribly outdated by comparison. Little touches like having actual physics for the breakable platforms, Doodle looking at you when he falls, and having animations for every single enemy, just makes the game feel way more alive. And you can tell that the people over at Lima Sky really put a lot of effort into characterization. There's also improved sound design that holds nostalgia with a few classic sounds like the enemies when you fall, or the still ever so ear-piercing UFOs, but also adds new ones for different platforms and things. In terms of the gameplay, you'll probably notice the physics are just a bit heavier than the original. It makes the game slightly more challenging, but also more satisfying to bounce off platforms with. In fact, in terms of challenge, I'd say Doodle Jump 2 is way more engaging than the first game. Some mechanics that were theme-specific are now in all stages, like the bear traps. Then you have new mechanics like the spike platforms and magnet power-up. But where I think the game's challenge really starts to shine is with the stars. Much like the eggs and the Easter theme from the first game, the stars aren't automatically attracted to you when you use an item, and since you need the stars to unlock the new themes, you're incentivized to be more careful and strategic with your movements, which makes even the standard theme way more interesting than the original was. And while I've only unlocked 3 of them so far, you'll be pleased to see that none of the levels are just rehashes from the first game. Each one is new and has something that makes them unique, not just visual-wise, but gameplay-wise. And I think every single one is worth going back to and trying to beat your high score, which, by the way, is now indicated, which is a nice touch. But while I have been pretty positive so far, I do want to go over some of the negatives. I think the biggest one is the fact that there's no option to remove ads. I'm one of those people who bought the original game, and I've been enjoying my ad-free experience. I really wish that Doodle Jump 2 would add an option to remove them with like an in-app purchase or something. Because right now you're forced to watch an ad every single time you die. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, and there are times where ads just don't play at all, but it is something I would seriously appreciate the option to get rid of, and I hope Lima Sky provides it in the future. Speaking of the future, there are a few missing features that are present in the first game that aren't here, with the most major one being multiplayer. I mean, admittedly the multiplayer in the first Doodle Jump wasn't exactly a killer feature, but it was nice to have. I'm interested to see if Lima Sky decides to eventually add it in, or if they focus more on single player content. There also aren't any achievements, and while the richer gameplay itself sorta makes up for it, I do hope they add some in, because lots of the fun I had with the first game was trying to spend the time to unlock the ridiculous achievements. There is this counter for breakable platforms, which is nice, but something more formal would be cool. I do just want to quickly reiterate though that I am making this video literally hours after the game's release, so I get the idea that at this point the developers are probably focusing more energy on seeing if people like the core gameplay, and I think on that front they did an excellent job, and if they do add all the stuff to the game I've been talking about, I might make a follow-up review. I can safely recommend Doodle Jump 2, and when compared to the first game, I'd say it's at least on par. It still has a little ways to go with things like the ads, and I think the fact that the first game has multiplayer, achievements, and a crap load of themes and unlockables built up over like 10 years prevents me from outright saying that Doodle Jump 2 completely makes the first one obsolete, but it's certainly getting there. When I first started up the game, I was honestly expecting like the usual mobile game stuff with a bunch of in-app purchases and subscriptions or something, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that Doodle Jump 2 takes the classic mobile game approach of making the core game actually fun, and at 50 megabytes, it's a light, free download that I recommend you check out. Okay, but why is Doodle so yellow though? Because like in the first game, you see, he's kind of this like greenish yellow. I mean, like if you looked, you can mistake him for being green. And then like in the official art here and in this like plush I got, like he's sort of like a dirtier yellow. But then in this game, they just like cranked it up.